Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM and WHUR. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. It can start with a whisper in the hallway, a cruel post online, or a shove when no one is watching. Bullying doesn't always make headlines, but for the children living through it, the impact can last a lifetime. As we mark Bullying Prevention Month, the focus turns not only to the kids who are targeted, but also to those who do the targeting. Experts say stopping bullying means more than punishment. It's about changing behavior, building empathy, and creating spaces where every young person feels safe, seen, and supported. So tonight, we'll hear how the DC Office of Human Rights is putting that philosophy into action through its Youth Bullying Prevention Program. My guest this evening is Ernest Shepard, Program Manager of the Youth Bullying Prevention Program for the DC Office of Human Rights. Ernest, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you for having me. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Let me just quickly share a few fast facts with you, many of which I'm sure you are already familiar with. Some 20% of students report being bullied. There is a higher proportion of female than male students reporting the bullying at school, 23% versus 17%. 41% of students who report being bullied at school indicated that they think the bullying would happen again. And among all students who experience various types of bullying, the most common forms were spreading rumors or being made fun of or being called names. As I'm sure you know, bullying is as old as the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It has been around for centuries. I would argue the only difference is the method of bullying. First, tell me, how does the DC Office of Human Rights define it, and what forms are you seeing most often among young people?
Good question. So the cool thing about the work that we do is that it's governed by the Youth Bullying Prevention Act, and that Youth Bullying Prevention Act, it has a legal definition of bullying. So we have three different areas where we have jurisdiction for how we enforce bullying. So public schools in DC, that's DCPS and charter schools, nonprofit organizations that work with youth, and government agencies that work with youth. And so the law mandates that they all have a youth bullying prevention policy. And in these policies, there's what we call a legal definition of bullying. So whether you are at Hart Middle School or if you get bullied at a Martin Luther King Jr. Library, the definition of bullying is the same. And how we define it is any behavior that is severe or persistent or pervasive that may be based on a characteristic such as race, sex, religion, political affiliation. And if that behavior does any of these things, if it impacts the way the students learns, their attendance, if their grades are impacted, if it causes a negative effect for the student's mental health, if the student no longer wants to participate in services, let's say they're doing tutoring and now they no longer want to do tutoring, or maybe sports, things like that. If any of those things are evident, then we're talking about bullying. So that's how we define it. So severe, pervasive, or persistent is the most important thing in there. Most of the cases don't involve bullying of a protected trait, but a good number do.
When you say of a protected trait, what do you mean?
Race. So bullying based on race, sex, determination. I think about 43% of our cases don't involve bullying based on one of those traits. And then the remaining percentage of those are because of personal appearance, race, religion, or gender identity expression, things like that.
Because I was about to ask, if not based upon race, what is the most pervasive form of bullying?
I think personal appearances, I think I have it here. 17% of cases are bullying based on personal appearance. The next highest would be race at 5.3%. So those are the two most pervasive. Personal appearances, like they're making fun of you because of the clothes you have on. You don't have the freshest kicks. You don't have the newest this, or you look like this, but it's not based on, but it's not race or anything like that. So just personal appearance. Most schools report that when they do have bullying, 17% of the time it's because of that.
Where is it most pervasive? Is it in school or online?
That's a great question. So our office don't actually collect the percentage of cases that are happening online. Schools report um, what's happening when what was brought to them. So I can't give you a number for the percentage that's happening online, but we are seeing an uptick in how schools are calling and saying, "Hey, things are happening online. Let's do some programming. Let's do something to combat what's happening online, or implementing new programming for digital citizenship or what have you." Um, but there's definitely an increase in number of cyberbullying incidents that schools are seeing for sure.
Tell me about your job specifically. What is it that you do, and how hands-on is it when it comes to addressing this issue?
Yeah, so the Youth Bullying Prevention Program, it's a compliance program within the Office of Human Rights. It's a program that enforces the Youth Bullying Prevention Act that I mentioned. And so I like to put it in three different buckets. The first bucket is compliance. So we are making sure that schools and youth serving agencies and our nonprofit organizations that work with youth. First thing, they have to have a policy. Schools have a little bit more additional responsibilities, so they have to make sure that their policy is online, that they are training every single year, and that they are collecting data and reporting it to the Office of Human Rights. So that's the basic compliance requirements, and they have to be doing investigations so if a parent says, "Hey, my kid is being bullied," schools have to investigate. If they don't investigate that, then they are in violation of the law. So our office, we ensure that schools are in compliance with the law, that they are doing their due diligence with investigations when parents report. And if they are in violation of the law, parents will reach out to us, and we have the responsibility of making sure that they get back on track with complying with the law. Second bucket would be outreach. So creating resources, tip sheets, going out in the community, talking to parents, making sure that people know who the Office of Human Rights is and what the Youth Bullying Prevention Program does, that outreach part of it. And then the last part is programming. We do a lot of student programming. Um, just last week, we went to Oyster Adams and did a student focus group, trying to get a sense of what the students thought about going to school there. Do they know what bullying is? Is there a lot of conflict? Do students feel safe? A lot of a school climate kind of focus group, so to speak. So we do some of that. If schools will reach out to us and say, "Hey, we have an uptick in cyberbullying, can you come do a workshop about that for some of our students?" We'll do that. A lot of our programming is catered to what the school needs. So we do a lot of that as well. Trainings throughout the year is part of our compliance mission. We do a lot of training throughout the schools and making sure that staff know how to prevent and properly respond to bullying when it does occur.
So talk to me about these focus groups.
Yeah.
What do they look like when you walk through the door? How do you select these students? How does it happen?
Good question. So we work with the schools when we are talking to schools, we share with them our services and what we do. And some of them will take us up on our offer to do school focus groups. If they want to assess how students feel about the school, what's working, what's not working, are there blind spots? Are things happening at recess that teachers don't know about? Is there a feeling that teachers aren't listening to them? We're trying to assess all of that. We're trying to see if there are ways in which that we can make some improvements to the school climate. And so how that works is we're working with usually the school bullying point of contact, which is every school has to have a bullying point of contact, which is someone that is mandated to do the investigations, receive the reports, to kind of over the overall apparatus of how each school handles bullying. And so we work with the bullying point of contact and school leadership, and Sometimes it's a little different. Sometimes they want to do third grade and fourth grade. Sometimes students want to do all the grades. And so we work with schools to figure out what's best. And sometimes they want to touch every single student. Last week, they just did 60% of students, made it a little bit easier for us to get through. So it just depends. We work with different schools. Different schools have different needs, and they have different grades that they want to hit. So it can look differently. But usually it's a round table of around 8 students that we're sitting with without the staff from that school. So we're sitting with them, we're asking questions, we're engaging them, we're trying to figure out what they know, what they think about the school. And we're writing notes and figuring out if there are things that we can take back to the administration to help them improve their own school climate based on the feedback that their students are giving them.
So in these roundtables or student meetings, how are they conducted? What do you ask them?
Yeah. The first question I always start with is use 3 words to describe what is it like to go to school here. That usually sets the table for how they will talk about, is it fun? Is it entertaining? Is there a lot of conflict? Is it boring? Or is it, are you sad when you come to school? Whatever the case may be. I'm asking them about their interactions with teachers. When you take an issue to a teacher, do you feel heard? Do you feel like the teachers are listening to you? We asked them last week, a big focus when we did it was what's happening at recess. Are they understanding what is happening at recess with the conflict that's occurring? A lot of the students reflected that a lot of the incidents are happening at recess. And so we can take that back to the administration and talk to them about what's happening at recess. And maybe we should increase the number of teachers that are at recess, for example. We're asking them about, do you know what being an upstander means? Usually probably depends on if it's middle school, elementary school, or high school, some of the questions, but we're asking them, do you know what bullying is? How does it differ from conflict? What have you been taught about how to handle conflict? Do you have good friends? If something happens, do you feel safe going to an adult at the school? Do you feel safe here? So those are some of the questions that we're asking and trying to get a good gauge on how the students feel being at the school.
What is an upstander?
An upstander is somebody that when they see something wrong, they're doing something about it. So that could be that if I see a kid making fun of another kid with a disability, for example, that I'm saying, hey, that's not right. Let's not do that. We shouldn't talk about people in that way. Versus a bystander that would just sit by and might laugh or just do nothing about it. Or an upstander might go and talk to a teacher about what they saw. So doing something to try to stop what's happening. And really, research says that doing the upstanding way, which is trying to speak out on behalf of another student or telling a teacher or whatever the case may be, that's one of the best ways to prevent bullying, because students learn, my other classmates don't like when I do this, or maybe this is wrong. Instead of imagine a culture where when you make fun of students or you pick on people and everybody just kind of sit backs and laughs and everything is what it is and nothing changes. It's a culture and a mindset shift. So when enough students are being upstanding and kind of fighting on behalf of their classmates, it shifts the culture in the classroom where the student that picks on people, they can kind of understand, maybe this isn't right. Maybe I shouldn't do this because people will call me out for it.
In these roundtables, forums, focus groups, how do you know? What are you listening for that would suggest that there is a problem in the school or with a particular student?
Great question. So we're trying not to pick on particular students. So I tell them, don't say any names. I don't want anyone going back and saying, hey, Johnny was a big topic of conversation. He said this and they said that. We try to get a overview of the school environment as a whole. Bullying research suggests that school climate is the number one way how we prevent bullying. Having a positive school climate is the number one way. Having a positive school climate means that students are happy, the students are trained, they listen to they listen to the students. Parents are involved in the discussion around bullying prevention. They,
Hold that point, Mr. Shepard.
sure.
Don't lose your train of thought. I do have to take a quick break. We want to remind you that you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about bullying. Of course, this is Bullying Prevention Month, and my guest is Ernest Shepard, Program Manager of the Youth Bullying Prevention Program for the DC Office of Human Rights. Before the break, we were talking about kind of identifying problems, Mr. Shepard, whether it be with an individual student or in a school. Please continue your point.
Yeah, so the purpose of the focus group to address the school climate. So what we're looking for is perhaps issues with teacher training. So if a student tells me, thinking back to some particular focus groups that we've had, students telling me that when they go to a teacher, they feel like they get in trouble for telling, that would be an issue of training. When they go to a teacher, they feel like the situation is kind of put in a basket of that's not really that big of a deal. That's an issue that we need to address. We need to make sure that that staff are trained on how to properly respond to incidents. Because if that goes on, students, when they really feel mistreated, when they feel hurt, if they feel bullied, if there is a culture of staff ignoring their concerns, those concerns will the students will remain silent when things actually happen to them, and that's something that we don't want. We don't want students kind of taking things into their own hands. One of the most eye-opening things that happened in one of the focus groups, there was this kid that talked to me about when I go home, my parent is telling me to handle conflict in this way. When I go to school, the teachers are telling me to handle conflict in this way. And it was confusing to him because he didn't know how to handle conflict. And so that type of suggestion we took to the school, like, are you doing any parent outreach? Are we talking to parents about how they're modeling good behavior at home? And that's something that we learned that we were not doing enough of. And parents are such a important part of the equation. And so, taking that feedback back to the school, and they were able to incorporate more parent outreach, bring us in for a parent training, things like that. So we're really trying to figure out if there are ways to improve the situation so that we can prevent bullying incidents from happening and make sure that students feel safe at school, making sure that they feel they're in an environment where when they go to a teacher that they're going to listen to them and that students are handling conflict in a productive way.
Do you believe that the students that you've been speaking to truly understand some of the severe consequences of bullying? We live in a new age.
Yeah.
Whether it is cyberbullying or direct bullying, the most severe consequences, we don't have to look too far back. To Columbine,
Mm-hmm.
the perpetrators of that school massacre, in the aftermath, it came out that they were bullied. We have also heard from cases where students who were bullied, harmed themselves or even took their own lives. Do you believe the students understand those consequences?
Yeah, some do, some don't. Some we have to do some more work. I think every school kind of has a different culture and probably understanding of the impacts of bullying. And that's where we really are trying to improve the knowledge of students throughout the district. So I think this is why we really try to get in front of every single school. We try to talk to every bullying point of contact. Some schools are frankly better than others at talking about bullying, not just in, Bullying Prevention Month, which is now in October, but throughout the school year. Are they talking about the consequences? Are they bringing in speakers? Are they doing the training? Some schools are just frankly better at it than others. And sometimes you talk to students and they really understand the impact of it. They understand why it's why bullying is harmful. And then you might go to another school where they are like, if it happens, they have less empathy for another student, and those are uh, concerning. But it gives us an avenue to do more programming at the school because we got more work to do. So you can kind of get a sense of that when you're talking to students, when you're talking to staff, and even when you're talking to parents about the student's level of empathy. If they understand the ramifications, some students don't think that words can hurt or words have an impact or that they should care about another student. And it just gives them an opportunity to understand that the work is not finished and that we really should provide more focus to the school, try to do our best to do more programming and reach parents, the staff, and the students as a whole. But most schools, they recognize the harmful nature of bullying. I think that has definitely, certainly been improved since I was a kid, growing up, for sure.
What kind of support does your office either offer, or what kind of resources can your office direct for those who are victims of bullying? What do you all recommend?
Yeah, if so, we want schools to be able to handle each individual incident of bullying. Ideally, like I said before, every school has a bullying point of contact, which is a person on staff that is handling 90% of these bullying cases. And most of them do a really good job. You bring an issue to the bullying point of contact at your school, and they should be opening an investigation, implementing measures such as uh, conversation, daily check-ins, social worker meetings, change of schedule, whatever the case may be, whatever is needed. That bullying point of contact should be meeting those demands of the family. Doing the investigation, and upon finishing the investigation, they are providing an outcome that is intentional in how they are responding to the harm that's been noticed. Now, the Office of Human Rights and the Youth Bullying Prevention Program, we come in if you feel like the school is not responsive, which it happens. If you feel that a school is not listening to you, you report it, they didn't do anything, they did not do an investigation, or they did an investigation, they didn't take into account all of all of the evidence that you provided, or maybe they did an investigation, they didn't offer any type of measures to keep your kids safe. When you feel like the school didn't do enough, OHR comes into the picture, and we'll go to the meetings with you. We'll reach out to the school, figure out if a violation of the law occurred. We'll talk to the school, build a safety plan with the school, and so we're really the person, that the catalyst to figuring out what went wrong and how can we get to a place where everybody feels good about the direction that we're going. And so that's where we come in if a parent feels that they've been aggrieved.
What about services for the perpetrators of bullying?
Yeah, similarly, when we train staff, we talk to them about, we're not a solely punitive. This is not about being solely punitive. Research says that you just kick a kid out for bullying, that's not going to have anything but negative consequences for that student. And we're a program that cares about both the student that's been victimized by bullying, and we also care about the student that is exhibiting those bullying behaviors, because they both deserve and need our care. So we need to be offering services and measures and supports to both students involved. And so for the student that's exhibiting those bullying behaviors, again, we're working with the school to figure out what exactly is needed. That's why investigations are really important, because we get to figure out, why are you behaving this way? Why are you pushing this kid or talking about him? Why are you online speaking this way about your classmates? Whatever the case may be, it's really important for us to figure out why that is, so that we can be, again, intentional and creative about how we're responding to the issue. When I'm training staff, I always tell them, you can have two bullying incidents, two different students involved that are exhibiting those behaviors. That does not mean that they should have the same outcome. And what I mean by that is, if one student is bullying because they are having a really tough time at home, maybe their parents are divorcing and they're exhibiting these behaviors, lashing out, whatever the case may be, that is different from a student bullying someone because they're bullying a kid with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Two different situations, both bullying behavior, but the response from the school should be slightly different with how we are showing support. Um, and so it's really important for schools to be thoughtful about how they are responding to it, and not just being punitive.
In your experience, what do you believe is the most common reason behind the actions of someone who is the perpetrator of bullying?
I think that the most common reason is how they're learning to deal with conflict, or how they're learning to. I think the behavior that's being modeled at home is really impacting how students are behaving at school. And so when parents exhibit behavior where they argue, the first thing they do is argue, or um, and handle conflict by physical violence, or whatever the case may be, that might impact the way your student handles conflict at school. A lot of parents will teach their kids to like hit first and ask questions later, which is something that we try to. That's not a great way to handle conflict. And so a lot of the behaviors are learned. They're learned behaviors from parents, or maybe friends, or whatever the case may be, from their community. And so that is really impacting the way that they handle conflict at the school, and just their understanding of empathy. Their it might be a lack of understanding of how their behavior impacts others, and
Mm-hmm.
it's tough. It's tough for them to kind of see what they're doing might have some really negative long-term impacts. And so I think those are probably some of the main reasons that students exhibit those behaviors.
Let's talk a little bit about cyberbullying, because certainly in the history of bullying, this is the latest thing. So, are cyberbullying investigations more difficult than the uh, face-to-face kind of issues that we've seen for centuries?
Yeah, they're definitely more difficult. Cyberbullying. What's the issue now is that a lot of students are hiding behind anonymous accounts. So the behavior is behind some level of anonymity. It impacts students differently because
How so?
most students are on their phone a lot, and so
Really?
they're
Yeah.
kids are basically addicted to their phones. And so when you have a device and it's bullying happening, it kind of feels to a student that it's nonstop, versus in-person bullying. You might feel like, if I can just get past music class where this is
Mhm.
happening, I can be okay. I can make it home, I'll be all right. But when students are addicted to their phone, they feel like it's just surrounding them, that it's something that they can't get out of. And so, if you don't know who it is, if you block this person and they're making another page, it can kind of just feel like it's too much. And so it's more difficult for schools to catch, mostly because schools don't have a lot of tools to work with if this person is anonymous. Schools aren't looking up the IP address and doing the, I don't know, CSI type things to try to
Mhm.
figure out who is who, unless it gets so horribly bad and difficult to deal with that it reaches like a criminal level and you can report it to law enforcement. But a lot of there's a lot of issues with people making pages and making that are posting inappropriate things or posting fights or posting jokes and insults and things like that. So cyberbullying it's a big deal, and a lot of students are on social media, and the more that students use social media, the more they open themselves up for risk of being bullied online.
Now, this is interesting, and maybe I'm uh, behind the learning curve on this. But you mentioned pages. Usually, when we talk about cyberbullying, I was thinking maybe it was in some kind of cyber chat room that students may be in, or even on social media. I know a lot of the young people do not use Facebook, but I'm sure that there are other forms, whether it be Instagram. But you said they're actually making pages. What do you mean?
Yeah, so I used to work for DC Public Schools, and I was in charge of investigating a bunch of different complaints: sex-based discrimination, race-based discrimination, and bullying, which led me to my role now. And when I was in that role, when I worked for DCPS, I was actually like investigating individual incidents of bullying. And a lot of the cyber incidents that we saw was someone making an anonymous page. Let's say the school is called Coronado, and they would say Coronado T page, TEAT. And so they would post just a bunch of just the happenings of what's happening at this school.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever's using this page to post things are posting fights, or they're posting pictures that they took without someone's knowledge, or they might be posting just inappropriate or embarrassing things to another kid, or making fun of someone that goes to the school. So that happened sometimes, and those were sometimes the subject of some of the investigations that we had. And so those were particularly hard because you don't know who made the page, and they're just posting tons of material that was really embarrassing and harmful to a lot of students.
Mm. Seems like a lot of work for students to, and I'm not making light of this, but I'm just thinking, for a student to really sit down
Mm-hmm.
and to create a page to harass another student, to bully another student. I'm fascinated and really kind of taken aback at the energy
Yeah.
that is required for someone to do that to another student.
Yeah, it's horrible. Those were some of those cases. It wasn't a terribly lot of them, but when they happened, they were definitely impacting the student in a negative way, and it was tough to figure out who was behind this page and what we can do to stop it.
Upon finding out, I'm assuming that there were times when you did discover who was behind it. What was the remedy to address this?
Yeah, the remedy a lot of times is obviously there's some type of punitive punishment, whether that be in school suspension or out of school suspension. And there's also a level of when you impact a lot of students. In the definition, we call that pervasive. When it's widespread,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the cyber incidents are widespread or pervasive. And so when you have a pervasive conduct, schools should be pervasive in how they respond to it, which means offering a widespread amount of support to other students. And so a lot of schools will offer individual support to students and things like that. But for the student that did those things, um, the punitive responsibility, taking accountability, whether that's apology letters, things like that. Maybe it's um, changing schools if necessary. It's hard for me to think the exact case and what exactly happened, um, but there's definitely was some type of measures to restore what was harmed, and to provide some type of level of accountability for the student that exhibited those behaviors.
With parents,
Yep.
and we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but I would imagine that, as we have often heard over the many years, where school authorities may come to a parent and say, your son or daughter may have had, a weapon, and they said they don't know where this has happened, they don't know how. I would imagine that for bullying, many parents don't even know that these things are happening.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, parents are. Yeah, a lot of students don't report what's happening at school with their parents, and so one of the advice that we always give to parents when we're talking to them is uh, to be genuinely curious about what's happening at school, about how your kid is feeling, about what they're posting, about how they're using social media, about their interactions with friends, because a lot of times they're not going to kind of report how they feel and how school went. And so it's really important that parents are curious about how school is going, and if you're noticing any changes in how a student is acting. If you know that your kid is chipper, they're upbeat, they're always happy, and then suddenly they're not that way, that might be time to ask some questions, whether to your student or the people at your child's school. If you notice that your kid is not eating the same, or they're not wanting to go to school, they're making up sicknesses, things like that. Those are all signs that something could be going on at school, and you should inquire about it. So definitely, we want to make sure that parents are noticing those changes, and that if you notice something, not to just ignore it, but to ask questions and seek out some type of support.
Hmm. Since you've been in charge of this particular program, what has surprised you the most
Mm.
when talking to students, teachers, parents?
What has surprised me the most? I think probably um, what surprised me the most is probably it's kind of difficult to reach as many parents as we want to. Um, I think a lot of parents express interest in the topic of bullying, but when we do a lot of the bullying parent outreach, there's not a lot of attendance. So if there's one thing that surprised me, I would think that they'd be more willing to listen to how we approach it and what we're trying to do, and take some advice. And I think they're willing to. I think it's just really hard to uh, reach them, and so that's something that we're trying to really. We've been really intentional, especially this month. We've done at least 8 different parent sessions, and while they're not heavily attended, we're really trying to do our best to reach as many as we can. So if we can have just a couple of guests every session, that's fine with us. That's been surprising. I think another thing that's been surprising is just the level of concern with cyberbullying.
Hmm.
Um, it's it's becoming a situation where students understand how impactful it can be. Parents are scared about what's happening online, and the staff are just kind of wondering what can they do to kind of prevent it from ever happening. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of wondering about what we can do with online behavior. And so we're in a new age now where a lot of the behavior is happening online, and we need to figure out how best we can equip students with understanding of harmful online behaviors.
What do you think might be the long-term impact of the modern challenges of bullying, whether it be for perpetrators or even the victims of bullying, from your perspective?
The long-term impacts,
If
if
these things are not corrected, I should say.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's long-term impacts for both. So for if you are a victim of bullying, there's research suggests that depression, anxiety, obviously there's mental health concerns with students that are bullied, and um, there's impact to your families too, because they have to also support you and deal with it. It can impact families as well. Um, it can impact long-term employment for students that exhibit bullying behaviors and it never goes corrected. If we let students, exhibit these behaviors without providing any type of intervention, studies show that they're more likely to be incarcerated. They're more likely to have trouble finding employment. They're more likely to have trouble establishing good peer-to-peer relationships. And there's tons of stories about obviously like suicidal ideation or inflicting harm on other people. And so there's tons of negative impacts that we're trying to reject, that we're trying to get ahead of, because we know that for both the victim and the student that's exhibiting those bullying behaviors, there can be some really negative consequences if we don't properly address it. One of the things that we know about bullying is that we're not going to completely eradicate it from Earth. It's something that happens, but how you respond to it is really important. And so that's what our program is trying to do, is trying to teach parents and staff, like, this is how you respond to it in the best way. And these are things that we should avoid.
I remember at the beginning of the school year, we were speaking to a broad spectrum of students from the region. And one of the things that really shocked me, because students are paying attention, one student spoke about teachers bullying other teachers. And that was a really surprising thing to say, is that he wasn't talking about what he was seeing peer to peer.
Yeah.
He was watching the activity of adults.
Yeah. That's a good point. I should have brought that up earlier. I think that's one of the things that some students will voice in the focus groups as well, is that while our law doesn't enforce any regulations as far as student to or peer, or I'm sorry, teacher to student. It's only a law that responds to student behavior. But the way that teachers and staff, how they interact with students, that's in the bucket of modeled behavior. And there are examples that I've seen in my work that staff at a school, how they're interacting with the students is really impacting how students also treat one another. So you have teachers that are mistreating students. That can happen, or maybe they are misusing the word bullying, or they allow different things to happen inside the classroom that maybe another student wouldn't allow. Those are all just kind of things that we're trying to avoid. And so sometimes those are things that are brought up when we're talking to students as well. So yeah, students will talk about how teachers, yell at them or things like that. And so we want to make sure that we are responding to that when we hear it.
Fascinating conversation. Ernest Shepard, the manager of the Youth Bullying Prevention Program for the DC Office of Human Rights. I appreciate your time, giving us all something to think about.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, October 27th. I'm Harold Fisher.